what in the world?
Yes, that's what.
Like, just let the person sleep next to a rope. You got to make them pay for it?
Leave it to the British to come up with something like that, eh?
Hey.
Oh, boy, got your rope tonight.
Can you imagine getting evicted from your rope?
Had you slept on the wrong side of the rope, did you? You know?
Interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a special news bulletin from our partners in the Twisted World.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a special news bulletin from Twisted World.
What is up, Twisted World fam? We are back with my boys, Cody and Andy. What's up, guys?
What's up?
Heyo.
Hey, guys, we appreciate all the feedback. Hey, that last episode, Malaysia 370, got some people hitting on Facebook talking about it, and some definitely crazy, interesting stuff. And just wanted to say to all you guys out there, if you haven't gotten a chance, go to our Facebook page, click the podcast tab, and any one of those episodes, your favorite episode, best, click it, share it, and just drop us a little bit of feedback on why it was your favorite. Before we do get into topic, guys, did you guys hear? And I know we're not trying to beat the dead horse with the whole COVID thing and, you know, everybody getting the shot and all that. But did you guys hear the conspiracy theory that's like really like just ramping up all over the place? Twitter, I think that there's some TikToks on it.
About the virus or about the vaccination?
About the vaccination itself. Did you guys hear it?
I did. I think it has something to do with AIDS.
It does. Yes. I could not. At first, somebody had sent it to me, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, this is just far-fetched. And then I find that it's hitting all over the place. That supposedly, the vaccine has HIV buried inside of it.
Hi.
Yes. So, a little scary if it's real. Very unlikely, but you know, that's what's going around right now. So you got to love those deep, dark conspiracy theories, right?
Way to redirect, right? Like you're just like, you know, we're so sick of talking about this COVID thing. We'll just wait, and HIV will be a thing again,
right? Yeah,
let's talk about that again all over.
Let's bring it back deep from the 80s. So now, you know, somebody had posted on Twitter. This was the one that was great. They said they were asked about did they get the vaccine, and they were like, yeah, I got my vaccine, and then immediately following asked if they had gotten their HIV test. Why this person saying
that person asked them that?
But yeah, they were talking, and then they were asked immediately following, hey, and by the way, have you gotten your HIV test? And I guess
such a personal question.
I'd be like,
no, what about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not in 40 years, but no. And he blasted out on Twitter, and Twitter just lights up. Like, why? Why are you putting the two together? So yes, very, very scary. I would really.
If anybody has got the vaccination and wants to go get a test and just let us know. I mean, I guess we'll do a podcast on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, send your HIV test results to twistedworld at Gmail. So we'll take them. We'll take a look. You know, we'll do a deep dive.
We will delve deep into that conspiracy. But no, I again, not to just keep beating the COVID thing, but just thought it was crazy. But no, our topic is something that dates back like 140 years. And still to this day, there's YouTube videos that are grabbing millions of views, that there's a plethora of them out there. And it is about Mr. Jack the Ripper. London.
Or Jackie,
Mr. Rip, Cody's buddy, you know.
My boy Jack.
His boy Jack, yes. always his boy Jack. 134 years. This just to kind of encapsulate what Mr. Rip has done or did in a short period of time, matter of a few months. He massacred a total, I guess they attribute a total of 5 murders and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But and did some very grotesque things to these individuals, all women, and he did it from a short period of time and then disappeared. Right? No, they have their hunches on who it could have been, and we'll talk about that. But some of the big things that we got to look at as far as this individual is that all the women, but I believe one, the one they didn't really talk about as far as did this individual have some of the characteristics of the others, but all the women were prostitutes. All of the women had alcoholism. Now, granted, alcoholism was rampant during this time period.
Oh, dude, I was watching a couple of videos and reading something. I mean, literally every one of them were like mentioned or in a timeline were seen drunk in the within the timeline of what is happening.
They were drunk briefly before death.
Yeah,
right before. Yeah. Well, so they didn't.
There's a minor explanation to that.
They
but
were
we
like,
can talk about that later.
Fine. They were having a good time.
They were numb.
Yeah,
they're fine. And he did it in Whitechapel district of East London is like, and I was looking at some comparisons, and I read somebody in one of the comments in one of the videos I watched. He said, "Oh, it sounds like Compton in East LA, right?
Or Philly."
Yeah, and basically it's just this Whitechapel district is where like majority of the poverty of London, England at the time existed. They said that there was about 250,000 inhabitants, roughly,
just in that area.
In that area.
What I was watching and reading was at this time in 1880s in that timeline, London was the biggest city in the world.
Yes,
and there was millions of people there, and this was considered to be like the slum, like where people that were rock bottom didn't have a lot of places to live was in this White Castle area.
Yeah, it was described. I guess it was so bad that people would just dump their sewage, like their bathroom junk, out in the street.
Their doo doo.
Yeah.
They didn't plumbing?
No, I don't think.
Well, okay,
but, I mean, some areas had some.
Some did, but like you'll see some of the photos that we're gonna post because of like the room. One of the rooms the lady like it looks run down. It looks abandoned.
They pooping in a box or bucket?
Probably a bucket, right?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of these rooms. A lot of these rooms had up to 80 people to a room. I saw it was some of the costs per night were 4 pence, which would be the equal of like a penny, right? 1 pence would be like equal to a penny. And it said that the average stay per night in one of these rooms, even though there's crammed tons of people in the room, is about 4 pennies in a sense, right? Or you could rent a rope for a tuppence, which is about a little over a half a penny. And this rope, you would basically it would be
That's my first thought.
Yeah, that's
kind of like can you afford
terrible.
death or can you afford a night in hell? So with 80 other people,
take a pick.
Yeah, take your pick. I mean, the rope's looking real good.
Real nice.
If you're pooping in a bucket and sleeping with 80 people. I mean,
this smells grotesque.
You're just like, no, you know what? I think I was born in the wrong timeline. I'm gonna restart.
Yeah. While they're drinking mass amounts of booze.
Yeah. Exactly.
So no, the rope was so that they could lean on the rope and go to sleep.
Lean on a rope?
Yeah. So,
tie yourself to it and then
it was tied to the ceiling, or it was tied to the wall and the floor, and then you would just lean
like
up against, in a sense, but you just leaned against it and slept in a sense, standing up, and it would just kind of support you, right?
Okay.
So you couldn't fall.
What in the world?
Yes, that's what.
Just let the person sleep next to a rope. You got to make them pay for it.
Leave it to the British to come up with something like that, eh?
Hey.
Oh boy, got your rope tonight.
Can you imagine getting evicted from your rope?
Had you slept on the wrong side of the rope? Did you?
Oh man, that's you're poor at that point.
Well, can you look up how much alcohol costs? How many pence alcohol costs, or maybe like a bottle or something?
Yeah,
I don't know. Got to be pretty heavily there. Though.
Got to be less than a room.
They said that most people would drink their sorrows away. So it must have been easy to get in some way because a lot of the individuals that we're talking about didn't have enough money to sleep at one of these places that had 80 to 100 people.
Yeah,
and they ended up like going out and prostituting in order to have a bed to sleep in, kind of
right.
thing.
And that case in point will, when we get to our first murder victim, it just totally makes sense when you start piecing together like kind of her like life right before she ended up in this slum. But I saw this statistic that it said that it was worse than 50-50 that if you lived in this area, that due to malnutrition and disease, you wouldn't even make it past 5 years old. So if you were born in this area, you were...
It was kind of crazy because I'm cutting you off there.
Yeah.
I was listening when it was listing all the victims. Like all the victims had children. And a lot of them had children. Like one of the ladies had 7 kids, but only like 5 outlived her.
Right.
Like it was common for all these women to have like children, but like a lot of them die. I noticed like a lot of them died 20 years before this all happened to them. So it was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, they're all out prostituting, and there was no protection.
Almost
back then,
all of them had been divorced. I think only one, maybe 2 of them had been widowed, but all had like 4 to 7 kids. And like of the 4 to 7 kids, like 2 per family would make it past when the parent died. So like who knows what the kids are dying of, but you know, I'm sure they're dying of the conditions that they're living in.
They were renting the rope.
The rope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Too many times.
So a beer back then was 3 pints for 3
3 pence?
pence. So they're
3
like,
pints for 3 pence?
I can sleep against a rope,
Yeah.
or I can drink this and sleep on the ground. Be fine.
Well, yeah, because it was 4 pence a night to get a bed.
Yeah. So, I mean, these people are drunk, so I'm sure they're not getting 1 beer too. That's probably what's happening is they're feeling so miserable about having to sleep up against a rope. They're just like, you know what? Who cares if I sleep against a rope tonight?
You know what? I'd rather wake up in a gutter
Yeah.
full of feces.
Yeah. Or I'm going to drink until I don't wake up. God.
I'm going to drink until I can't smell the feces.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. Like, you got to be numb for that.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of leads into like, and we'll talk about our first murder victim and kind of how she ended up and where she ended up and the choices that she made. And so the late summer of 1888,
Throwback.
Miss Mary Ann Nichols. So Miss Mary Ann Nichols, much like Andy had talked about, you know, she ended up, you know, separated from the man she was with and ends up having to go and work, and she becomes a maid, an indentured servant. And she's working, but Miss Mary Ann Nichols had a severe drinking problem.
Mm.
Her severe drinking problem led to her basically getting fired. And so in order to afford her nightly stay, she became a prostitute, like a lot of women in this area.
As you do.
Yeah. It's just, you know, you're like, hey, lost my job. I'm going to go prostitute myself.
Prostitution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heard it pays the
You
bill.
can start immediately.
Right?
There's no process. It's great. Anyway, one of the pluses of being prostitute. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that they've blocked a lot of the marketing schemes for those, though. So you got to find more tactics.
Yeah. You got to find your
Get an
corner.
MLM.
But back then, probably wasn't too hard.
Yeah.
Right?
If you get 5 underneath you, those 5 can then pay you for their services, and then they can get 5.
I think there's a word for that.
There is a word for that.
Yeah.
It's not pyramid scheme.
Pimping.
It's
not pyramid scheme.
It's called multi-level marketing. Okay.
Shit. We have now created the new MLM people, and we promise it's not a pyramid scheme.
And if you know, it's not a pimp. She's a madame.
Pimping.
So you start off, you're the madame first, and then you get 5 under you, and then you become the
Madam.
the MLM pimp,
The Madam Pimp.
the madam pimp.
Yeah.
So you start off at the bottom, work your way up, and you know now you've got yourself a little corporation going.
Yeah.
And then when they get out of line, you get your buddy Jack. Take care of them.
That's it's
Yeah. Mess them up.
Cody's like, I provide side services. Let me hit my boy Jack up.
Oh
He's
So-
good at what he does.
Oh my god.
He's so precise.
He's surgical. Some would
He
say
is.
in his method.
He will ensure they stay in line, though. You know. So she was a maid, fires, becomes a prostitute, a heavy drinker, to the point where the night that she, you know, allegedly was murdered by the Ripper, she and her prostitute buddy were doing their prostitute thing, and sometime in the near the end of the night, her friend's like, "All right, let's go, we're done," and she's like, she in a sense, boasts about making enough to cover 3 nights worth of rent, but drink it away.
Right.
So, as Andy put, like 2 pints or 3 pints gets you 3. So, I mean, you got to picture she's been drinking all night, right? Because if it's 4 pence to stay and she had 3 days worth, she had 12 pence. I mean, she just pounded it away. So she's like, no, I got to go get my rent. And she goes out and gets her rent. And at 3:40 a.m., the body's found.
When was she last seen?
By that friend, sometime a little after midnight is what it said.
Wow, okay.
So
yeah, if I recall, this was the one where they were at some kind of like party with 2 soldiers, and they left with the soldiers. And basically, what had happened was when the officers came finally with the scene of the call, there was a soldier standing on the corner down the block, right, standing there, and they asked him what he was waiting for. He said, "Oh, my friend's in there with someone." And so that was all. That dude was all questioned. They ended up like getting excused away and everything because they were there on leave. But yeah, ended up she was going to make her rent back.
Yeah,
because she didn't live in those buildings that she was found in.
Right.
But yeah, 3:40 a.m. she was found on somebody was leaving to go to work, and this is the one that.
Yeah, and so and this was the first victim, and the reason that's important is because it seems as time goes on, Mr. Jack got a little more artistic per se, right? So the first victim, throat was cut all the way to the spine, and she had abdominal slashes that exposed her intestines. Okay.
Nice.
Yes. Nice. Well, at least she wasn't talking.
Yeah.
The second murder is where it gets a little like he just starts getting gruesome at this point. And, some of the suspects later, or one in particular, is kind of why, the investigators believe it was him, because they just, and we'll get into him in a little later, but just know that it got kind of worse as time went on. This one was found about a week and some change later. Body found at 6 a.m. And Annie Cotman, guess what she was?
A prostitute.
With a severe alcohol problem.
Prostitute.
Yeah. A what?
No, never. Don't.
Never.
It's from a show. Never.
So she was known like her friends that knew her and stuff. They categorized her yet again as a heavy drinker, always drinking. All her, her money would go to alcohol, severe alcoholic, and yet again, throat slash down to the bone. But this time the bowels were removed, and this is super gruesome, but a portion of her stomach skin placed on her left shoulder, and a portion of her flesh, small intestines, were placed above her right shoulder. And then sections of her bowels completely removed and taken.
Yeah, it said her womb had been removed and taken, like her womb as well.
Oh, there was the other ones that were deeper, like stuff was removed.
There's a reason why I say that now, because it was from multiple victims. It wasn't just one that the uterus or the womb had been removed.
And other parts. He gets crazier.
Yeah. He wants to take souvenirs. It's not every day
this is the one.
Somebody up. So I remember that time. Yeah.
Am I wrong?
On the shelf?
Yeah, the shelf. What's that? Oh, it's a womb.
Yeah.
Wasn't this the one that was found in like a backyard area, and she had her items had been organized and kind of laid next to her body, and like 2 rings went missing?
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's like taking this next step. He's like, all right, I did the first one. I'm gonna go a little crazier with this one. But how these things, got deeper and darker. And a lot of investigators think that that's why they hung on like a ritual aspect for so long, because there was a lot of these underground like cults, as they put it.
The Black Sacrament.
The Black Sacrament.
They were performing the Black Sacrament.
I don't even want to know what that is. That doesn't sound nice at all.
My Skyrim people know what I'm talking about.
Oh boy, listen. So that they hung on this. They're like, hey, this is some part of some like cult, and doing it's a part of a cult ritual. Number 3 was Elizabeth Stride. This one, though, I couldn't find if she was an alcoholic, or if even 100% if she was a prostitute or not. I'm guessing she was, seeing how all the rest were. But this one was the one where he was probably in the middle of doing what he did. Her throat was slashed like the rest. However, there was this guy rolls up on his buggy and horse and happens to see it down an alley, runs over, and that was all that was done to her. But her body was still warm. Her blood was still like flowing, which, would denote that he had just begun and maybe got startled. And that was all that happened to that one.
Yeah.
But 45 minutes later, a Catherine Eddowes. Now, Catherine Eddowes was out drinking, go figure, so drunk that at 8:30 p.m., the police officials, Scotland Yard, took her into custody to let her sober up. I mean, she was like smashed at 8:30.
Yeah. Yeah. He was locked up and then released around 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Wait, they put her in a holding cell because she was so drunk?
She was so drunk and so intoxicated that they literally put her in a cell to sober up and then they released her at 1 a.m.
Oh, what nice fellows over there, Scotland
Yeah.
Yard.
Like, hey, we'll give
Constable.
you a little bit.
Yeah.
Constable. So, but that you got to think about it. Like, this is 1800s, right? Late 1800s. Like, you got to be pretty smashed for them to care enough to lock you up, put you in there for a while, let you sober up, and then release you at 1 a.m. Her body was found less than a mile away, I believe.
Yeah, they said it was a mile, about a 15-minute walk.
Yes. Yeah.
About a 15-minute walk between the bodies.
Just under a mile, somewhere right in there. Again, you're taking things a step further. Uterus and left kidney were removed and missing. This time, he absolutely mutilated the face, removed the nose and slashed the cheeks through the eyelids. And
that's gruesome. The eyelids, so like the body open.
Yeah, he just cut her up.
You can like see her.
But yet again, the intestines and disemboweled intestines were placed over the right shoulder. So again, they're back to this like it's some kind of ritual, right? And they're just not trying. They can't figure out why this is important, but he keeps doing this, right? He keeps placing these things over the shoulder.
Yeah.
One crazy thing though, they just a quick walk away, they found her bloodied apron.
It was a piece of it had been ripped off. And they don't know if it was during an altercation or not, but it was a piece that was ripped off and they found it on the ground.
And then the chalk inscription on the wall. And it read,
oh, he wrote something.
Well, they're not 100% sure. Somebody wrote it.
Someone wrote something.
Yeah.
Later we'll talk about, I'm assuming we're going to talk about the letters, and the writing on the wall did not match the letter. So there's that, but again, chalk or whatever was on the they're not sure if it's related or not.
Yeah, my handwriting's different when I do it on walls.
True. When you
when I'm on a chalkboard.
Yeah. When I'm on a chalkboard, when I write letters.
Speaking of handwritings is different, Julia wrote that thing on the calendar. Like my wife like texts a group text like, "Hey, I don't remember writing this. Did you write it?" And I'm like, "Babe, that's your writing. You just wrote it at an angle." So, anyways, yes.
Case in point. See,
evidence.
There we go.
Evidence
Confuse
that
yourself.
when you write standing up against a wall, your handwriting isn't always the same.
Yeah.
Look. So I mean, Andy just uncovered a clue.
Yeah.
Right. Putting two and two together here.
Because you're writing with your arm instead of your like hand and wrist at that point. So
Yeah.
different muscle memories.
Different
can't
control.
really
Totally get it.
Plus,
So-
you just murdered someone, so maybe
You're
you're a little shaky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adrenaline
Like, yeah.
or serotonin, depending on who
Like
you are.
it took a minute probably to find your chalk because
He's so excited. He's like, I can't wait. I can't wait to write this letter. Let's get it. Yes.
well, his melatonin hadn't kicked in yet.
Yeah.
He's fired up. This guy. Listen, Mr. Jack
This
is not a
dark
good
humor,
man.
man.
He's very dark. Listen. So the wall says
They've all been dead
The
for like
wall-
100 years.
They're
I'm sure all their relatives
they're
don't
still
even care.
studying this stuff, by the way.
Empathy,
It's crazy.
Zero.
The wall said, the Jews are the men that will be blamed for nothing. Okay. The Jews are the men that will be blamed for nothing. So, investigators said that if this was him, he's either inciting that the killer was a Jew or that the Jews are the reason that the killer is doing it. All right. Again, we have no proof that this was part of it, other than the fact that this torn piece of apron from her apron with her blood was right next to the writing. Coincidence? I don't know.
It was misspelled too. I don't know if that mattered, but Jews was misspelled.
Yeah. So
What? Really?
Yeah.
some
it
of the
was
letters work too.
Juwes. And the Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing.
Yeah.
It was very hard to read.
Oh, he was very British, didn't that?
It
Not
was-
be blamed for nothing.
But yeah, and it was spelled wrong. So I don't. Maybe it wasn't spelled wrong. Maybe that's how they spelled it in shorthand or something like back then. But when I read it, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of it reads Jews," but the way that it was
I know.
It's also
out.
a double negative, so it doesn't make sense either. So anyway,
Right. Well, and
Well,
then
do it again. Do the accent again.
Jews. I'm trying to figure out how to say that. Jews.
The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. Yeah.
Cryptic. So let's get into murder victim number 5, Mary Jane Kelly. Now, keep in mind, before this, all the victims to this point are in their 40s. Okay. This woman was 25 years old.
Okay.
All right. I don't know if there's any importance to that, but for whatever reason, all the rest were in 40s. And now, mind you, maybe most of the prostitutes that were out there and heavy alcoholics by this point, maybe that, it makes sense. But Miss Kelly was the youngest. She was 25 years old and the only one to be murdered indoors. So she had, I guess, her own room that she was renting. And she was out with a fellow named George Hutchinson. He was the last one to see her at 2 a.m. She asked him for a loan. He didn't give it. And then she ends up hooking up with what appears to be a distinguished gentleman. And this is how George explained or described the man. He said that he was in a black coat with astrakhan fur. And so I looked up astrakhan fur, by the way, and I guess it's like one of the most expensive furs as far as lamb sheep fur. It is so back then it would have been like the top of the line fur coat.
Oh, okay, wow.
He had a black tie with a horseshoe pin. He had button over boots and a large gold chain hanging from his waistcoat.
Whoa.
Sounds like
I noticed this in a lot of the murders. There was always like a comment of a respectfully dressed man or a delightfully dressed man. Like it was always a thing that they were to point out how well dressed the person was. Now there are only a few people that actually saw or believed to have seen the murderer.
Yeah.
We don't know that this is the person, but that kind of thing kept coming up a lot across. As people came forward saying that they believe they had seen him.
so. It would point to somebody that is affluent, right? Has some money, pending that this is the person. Because, like Andy puts, yes, different people mention with different murders and people in the area that, again, so here's this guy that clearly has money and he's in an area that is the most poverty-stricken area in all of London.
Wait, what kind of jacket?
Astrakhan fur?
Dude, he's a pimp.
That's what I'm saying.
He's a pimp.
Is that where pimps are like, hey, we're gonna make these women scared. We're gonna control them. We're gonna dress up and we're gonna look like Mr. Ripper.
Oh, Mr. Ripper.
Yeah, and fur coats.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Gold chains, button over boots. It sounds a little like pimp to me.
They'll be like, why aren't you intimidated by my fur coat? Like, just fur coat. No, Jack the Ripper wore it. I'm like, who?
Yeah.
Like, aren't you educated? No, I'm a prostitute. Dictionary history? No, I'm a prostitute. This really backfired on me. I really should have went the wrong way here. I'll get rid of this coat.
And then it stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they changed
just like that.
They changed the colors from black to purple and it went. So George last seen her with this gentleman that he describes, and then the body was found by the landlord, and she was, I guess, a week behind on rent. So he goes to her room, looks through the window, and sees her absolutely mutilated body. Now, she had her nose, cheeks, and eyebrows partly removed, abdomen completely emptied. Both of her, upper girls were gone and removed. Her uterus, kidneys, and one of them were placed under her head. The liver placed between her feet, spleen placed by the left side of her body, and the heart was missing.
And her throat was cut so deep that I believe they said the head was almost severed.
Almost severed.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So she wasn't looking too.
Yeah. So the other.
She's not feeling that great. Actually, a feeling of emptiness overcame.
Oh, her head's in another place.
Yeah. Another
Oh
place.
my God. Guys, listen. The poor woman has been massively mutilated, okay?
And you're the one laughing, not me.
Oh man, I'm laughing. You guys kill me.
I'm like trying to think of another one.
No.
It's like that moment from The Office. Pudding.
No.
Well, at least she wasn't out of her mind. At least.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Mine's still intact.
Her life was falling in pieces.
Oh my gosh. Listen.
She was falling apart.
Listen, fam out there. Forgive them, for they know not what they do.
A bloody mess that was.
A bloody mess. So another importance here is that the examiners on all the other bodies said that he could have probably done it in 30 minutes to 45 minutes, like all the other ones.
Did they like test that? They're like, get a body in here. I'm going to see how long fast I can
Yeah,
cut
they
this
just
dude
figured,
out.
hey, slash, dump, you're done.
Yeah.
But this one, the amount of work that he did to her, they speculated in the uprights of a couple hours of work. Like he spent some time on her. Poor Miss Mary Jane Kelly. She got work done. The examiners did come up with what they believe would have been the knife that would have been used is something along the lines of like a 1-inch wide blade and 8 inches long. And at this point, they're now confident by this murder that the killer also had some knowledge of anatomy. So just because of the incisions he made and how he made them, how he, removed the intestines, the heart, the whole works.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they didn't see it as, even though it was grotesque and definitely a mutilation, they didn't see it as like sloppy.
Different doctors inspected all the bodies at different times, and only one didn't use the word advanced level of understanding for it, not anatomy. This person had an advanced level, not just in the sense of like an animal, sacrificial or skinning,
right?
But that they actually knew where parts of the body were and how to remove them. I believe at one time there was this concept of no mistaken cuts, like no misstep. He took cuts, only cuts
no
that
excess.
No excess. He only took cuts that were necessary. Except for the very first murder, they said was almost as if he was rushed or it was the first attempt. He had never done it before, kind of thing. And
that was before the serotonin kicked in.
He started, it got more advanced as it got further along.
Yeah.
Precision is the difference between a butcher.
Right. And then, so the one report though I said that I read is, again, back to the 1 inch wide to 8 inches long, different than like a scalpel, right? This wasn't a scalpel blade, but still a very sharp, but large blade. Mm. And so, and again, it appeared as though he had quite a bit of knowledge of what he was doing. And so at this point, I know that one of the reports I read said this is where they started shifting from the ideas of ritual killing, as far as like a cult, to this is an individual that is specifically targeting and he's got his own thing going on, right? So there was where's it at? There, by this point, there was something called the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, which was basically neighborhood watch, right?
Yeah.
So
and they were determined to figure this out.
Yeah, like these guys were meeting day and night, looking at everything. Like they were gonna find who was doing it.
And they didn't tap. They don't.
They don't tap.
Yeah, you said it was a vigilance committee, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, slipping in magic.
Yes,
those guys don't tap.
Those guys,
no matter
don't tap.
what,
they don't. They don't.
Always ready.
So the head of this committee, a Mr. Luss, he received a box. And now, before we talk about what was in the box and the letter that came with it, by this point, there had been numerous letters. There had been tons of letters claiming that they were the killer.
There were the two. So I saw you wrote this down, but I wanted to kind of clarify. So there were hundreds of letters.
Hundreds, yes.
How it kicked off, there were 2 letters that were sent by the same individual. They do believe this to be the person, but there's no evidence that it is, based on the other letter that you're going to reference being what they believe to be accurate.
Yeah.
The first 2 letters are the ones where he says "Dear Boss," and they're Dear Boss letters. He addresses him "Dear Boss," sends them to, I believe, the journalism. I don't remember which journalism it was or place it was, but both of them say "Dear Boss," and both are signed Jack the Ripper. So this is the first time you hear the name Jack the Ripper, because there was actually another name given. I don't know if you knew this, to what Jack the Ripper was referred to as before it got media station.
2 of them actually: Whitechapel Murderer and Leather Apron.
The Leather Apron. I saw that one. So it was like they didn't really. Those were the names that were kind of going around the streets. But once it got like notoriety and it started, like, even the United States at the time was writing articles about how bad this was and the police sucked and this kind of thing.
And we'll talk about a specific American too, which is crazy.
Yeah. But it had spread. Once it got like this natural or national and global notoriety, that's when the Jack the Ripper letters came into play. So there's a lot of evidence that it is him because of the content that was mentioned in there. Things like he was going to cut the ears off and deliver them to police. They were never done, but they're in one of the murders.
And one of the letters said, like, tonight's going to be a double.
Right, and the double event,
and then that was
he actually referred to it as a double event.
Yeah,
and he talked about slicing ears off, and there was an attempt at slicing ears off, but that was the one where he got rushed, possibly in the act. So it's very possible these first 2 letters are the original, and then once those 2 letters were kind of the start, there were hundreds of letters that came through after that. Now, after those first 2 letters, the only one that they believe to be actually a letter from the Ripper is the one I'm assuming you're going to give us details on.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, so it came with a box, and in the box was a kidney. He says that this is the kidney of victim number 4, Miss Eddowes. And this is what the letter said that came with it. It says, "Mr. Luck, sir, I send you half the kidney I took from the woman. I preserved it in I preserved it for you, blah, 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 for you. And the other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that I took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, catch me if you can, Mr. Lusk." Right? So he's telling Mr. Lusk, catch me if you can, right? He didn't sign it, the Jack the Ripper. He didn't any of that. Yeah. And I know this is... there may be a reason, I don't know, but the kidney was preserved in wine. So I don't know if he was trying to signify something.
The only thing that I read was that the doctors that had examined the body of the 4th victim examined the kidney and said that it could be, but there was no way for certain to verify if it was. Because it wasn't an entire kidney. It had been some time. There's no way for them to identify what the kidney looked like without actually seeing it removed or it be there. So there's validity to the fact that it came with a kidney, but there's no validity to whether or not this is the guy, because you assume he would have signed it the same way. There was a comparison of the handwritings, and it was close but not perfect kind of thing. So we're not really sure.
The examiners did say that pretty much without a fathom of doubt, it was a human kidney.
It was a human, right?
So if this wasn't him, there's some other dude out there jacking kidneys from people.
Yeah, and stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't just some animal kidney.
There was no black market then. I like. Enjoy your bathtub full of ice. Yeah, no.
But the other ones, right? The other 2 letters could significantly be about notoriety. I want a name that I like. This is what I want to be known as. I have now done this. I'm telling you about events. These things are happening, and this one could strictly be about catch me if you can. Like, I know that you guys are out here and you're this small and you're trying to like come and find me. I'm gonna taunt you.
Yeah.
Why he wouldn't, and I don't know the dates. I mean, were these things sent to the same time? Maybe he hadn't classified himself as Jack the Ripper. But it's interesting that he didn't use Jack the Ripper in this comment when he sent it out.
Well, right. And so they received that box, by the way, October 15th. So this was after the 4th, but the 5th hadn't happened yet.
Oh, so this was directly after Miss Eddowes.
Got it.
This is just right after, very shortly after Miss Eddowes.
It could be by this point. It could be by this point that it actually hadn't hit the news. So this actually could be the first letter. I don't know when.
I don't know either.
Because the news, when it came out, it talked about the double event. The double event was right before
Miss Eddowes. Or Miss Eddowes was part of the double event.
She was part of the double event, right?
And so that they had received letters before this point, but this was the first time. Not only was it a letter, but it was possibly some kind of evidence,
right,
that he was the guy.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So 5 murders, and then that was it. There wasn't any more that matched or went along with anything that he had done. So at this point, he's now He's done his fifth. Fifth was the most grotesque and bloody. And then I know for some time after, there were some letters that started popping up, and it was just, again, they looked at, like Andy was talking about, and it just didn't match handwriting. It didn't match, anything that they believe, and they just think it's people doing pranks or whatever the case may be. But either way, the fifth murder happened, done, he's gone. Okay. Now let's talk about some possible suspects. Now, I think 3 out of 5 of these were of Jewish descent. So, back to the whole chalkboard thing, or chalk writing thing.
Yeah.
So there was a John Pizer, a Polish Jew bootmaker, and he also was believed to, on the side, run an extortion racket against prostitutes, telling them for money, and even threatened to, quote unquote, rip them apart if they refused to pay.
They said there was actually rumors going around of a man that was beating up on prostitutes. So he was pimping them. He was smacking them around.
Yeah.
So that's where that leather apron name came from.
Leather apron, right?
Yeah.
Because his nickname was, lo and behold, Leather Apron, because he wore a leather apron. He carried around a large knife, bootmaker, I guess. Unfortunately, Mr. Pizer had 2 alibis, as I read, very strong alibis for 2 of the murders. So, may or may not be him. The next one is a Severon Klazowski, a.k.a. George Chapman. He was born in Poland, attended college, and was also attended college for medical, and was also appointed as a surgeon's apprentice.
Ooh, didn't know that.
Yes.
Now, this is the guy that technically she wasn't hanging out with him, but she knew really well and talked with him that night, right? Before, was this Mary Jane Kelly? Is that the same? That's the same.
No,
guy?
I think it's a different George. Maybe, I don't know.
Because
George
I
is
knew
a very popular name.
it was a very popular name.
Well, yeah. Well, and he changed his name to George.
You're right. Sorry, George Hutchinson. Okay.
But still,
erase that.
So this guy changed his name because he came from Poland, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna basically change my name to a UK name because George Chapman wasn't his born name."
Right.
So he fled Poland and immigrated to the UK, changed his name right before the murder started.
So he changed his name right before he started murdering.
Yes. Well, we know he fled to the UK.
Wouldn't you murder first and then change your name?
Yeah, I don't know, right?
Like, if you're going to do it, I'm like, you know what?
Well, you get an alias so that you don't get anybody tracing you back to the fact that, because nobody knew him. Like, when they started checking on this guy, that's when they found out that over in Poland is where he got all his medical training. Because while he's in the UK, he was a barber. So he worked as a barber in Whitechapel during the time of the murders. His wife stated, and check this out, one of his wives stated that he would go out for hours at all hours of the night and then come back. Later, by the way, poisoning multiple wives with a compound much like arsenic, and then hanged in 1903 for the murder of his wife. Now, the reason they're not necessarily believing it was him was he like used this special compound and like went the distance to poison his wives, but did, and then turn around and mutilated these other women in a very much different kind of way. So they're looking at it from a psychological point of view.
Yeah, torturing women.
Yeah, like he probably would have done his wives the same way.
Yeah.
Right? But who knows?
What's really weird about the tie here when you say barber, and this is kind of like, it popped in my head, and then I was like, I'm gonna Google and see if there's any kind of tie there. So Sweeney Todd came out in 1845. And
it came out before?
It came out before. And there's this idea that maybe Jack the Ripper was obsessed with the killings of Sweeney Todd. And that, this demon barber, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I
didn't know it came out that.
Considered to this. There's this idea out there that he was an obsessed copycat. Like, he was trying to copy the things from the book. Now, I guess Sweeney Todd, I don't know the history behind that one. That one actually might be, and it was a fictional character.
Yeah.
But I believe it's based on a true story of a person that was a barber that did murders and yada, yada. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see, think about the timeline. If it's like 1845, 1849, Jack the Ripper was seen to have been anywhere from his 30s to 50s, right? So he would have been a kid when Sweeney Todd came out.
Yeah.
And he's a barber.
So he reads this, memorized,
he's a surgeon,
mesmerized
turned to barber. I'm just saying.
There's a little tie there. Maybe Mr. George Chapman is our killer. But we have a couple more. We have Francis Humbledy. Now, this guy's an Irish American, made a fortune posing as an Indian herb doctor in America and Canada. He was connected to some deaths in Boston, but he escaped before he could be persecuted. And it was claimed that he despised all women and claimed to possess a hatred towards prostitutes. Now, these are people that were interviewed back in the States that knew him. It was known that he would hold male affluent parties in Washington, D.C., where he displayed preserved female reproductive organs, boasting that they had come from every class of woman. He engaged in homosexual activity, which, by the way, he was arrested for in Europe because back then it was illegal.
Right.
And he fled back to New York shortly after the murders had completed. So remember, because the last murder happens and then boom, no trace. Right. So this guy has this anger towards women, specifically prostitutes, and, possibly killed some people in Boston. And then he bounced out back to New York.
He was also known for dressing very elaborate. He liked to wear military suits. He would wear fur coats. He would wear big hats. He was, I think the only thing I saw that they said was based on the descriptions, which was a vast number of different descriptions. He did have the mustache that they referred to Jack the Ripper having, but that he was a much taller than most of the people had said. He was 6'1", and he was, an Irishman. He was a white guy.
Yeah.
So they said the mysterious, being able to hide and get things, because there's possible that people were around a body and Jack the Ripper would be there kind of hiding in the shadows because he was in the middle of the act.
Right.
They said it would be difficult for someone that's 6'1" to be able to pull something like that off, but dude. He dressed up in a way that people would notice.
Well, he was rich.
Yeah,
so it makes sense that his attire would match what has been described by individuals.
And big thing, he was arrested as a suspect. He was arrested because they believed that they wanted to question him. He actually got arrested. We talked about some of these other candidates as far as people that were investigated. He was legit arrested as a suspect, and then got out on a bail, and then fled the country.
Wonder why he fled.
Well, he ran away from a murder once before, right?
All right.
Just saying.
He's like, I did my job. I'm out. I did read though that some of the stuff that was unlikely though. He didn't necessarily have the knowledge from a medical or scientific point of view. And that was the one thing that they were just they didn't believe that he could have surgically done what the Ripper did. And that, again, the fact that these examiners firmly believe that this individual was trained or had a lot of knowledge in this, and he was not one.
He was a usual suspect. Right?
He was, yeah.
They were looking at someone in the area. He was staying at a house that was around the corner from one of the people that got murdered. And he's one of those ones that had a rap sheet. And they're like, this guy, it has to be him. He dresses the part. He's here. The timelines match up. He's from America. This didn't start until he got here.
Yeah, circumstantial evidence.
It was definitely circumstantial. There wasn't really anything that pointed to him.
And then the last one. Now, the last one, other than the last piece I'm going to talk about with this guy, he was actually a small probability, but then there's this other piece that comes out later, and it kind of just increased even to today, believing that he was prime suspect. So Aaron Kosminski, he was a Polish Jew that he regularly threatened women with a large knife, and he was regarded as insane because he basically, when you read the description of this guy and some of the stuff that people that knew him, that he went through, it's schizophrenia, heard a lot of voices, being told to do things and things along those lines. Again, other than the fact that he had threatened women with knives and had been in that area and they think he's crazy, not a lot of evidence. However, there was a Shaw that belonged to Miss Eddowes, victim number 4. That was possibly. And we'll get it. Yes. And we'll get into a little bit here in a second. So this Shaw was sold at an auction, and they found it, and it had possible DNA bloodstains on it. They tested it in 2014, and they tested it against Mr. Kosminski's family and Miss Eddowes, and they did these DNA tests, and they matched. Or so they say. Right? They matched both families.
Did you read into this as far as the type of DNA and what it actually?
I didn't go deep.
Okay,
no,
I did
because I want to talk about the 2000. They did it again in 2019.
Yeah, go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'm gonna talk about it.
So, people discredited it, saying, "Hey, with time and all this and all this other, contamination and just throwing all this stuff out." Again, this is 2014, so we're just talking 8 years ago.
Yeah,
and then fast forward to 2019, a Cambridge, I believe, was a Cambridge,
university.
The university, but there were some scientists that were like, "Hey, let's check it again with even now more advanced technology," and they came to the same conclusion that there was a match, right? But again, a lot of other scientists are like, cross contamination, all these different all the things that could have happened, 130 years ago, right? So I guess Andy's gonna enlighten us deeper on these tests.
The DNA results. So going back, the suspected Shaw was of supposedly one of the constables, one of the police officers, took the Shaw and kept it. He stole it as evidence from the scene.
Oh,
his ancestors found it, I think, about 100 years later. And then it was donated and whatever, and it was sold. And that's how it got into the hands of people that were going to be able to read.
Did you find out how much it was sold for? I was trying to find it.
I'll look it up in a second. But yeah, but the DNA tests that were done in 2014 and 2019, they ran the DNA test. Again, is the age of the Shaw, the DNA test, what came back, they ran it against Aaron Kosminski.
Yeah.
And it was and I'm going to butcher the heck out of the word. I'm going to butcher the heck out of it. Mitochondrial. Okay. It's DNA that specifically ties to the mother, the female. You can only use that DNA to rule out a suspect, not to rule in. Because if you run that form of DNA, it's possible that a lot of people have ties to it. So when somebody comes back and says his DNA was found on it, it just means that he can't be excluded as the killer.
Right.
That he could be.
Yeah.
Because of the
it doesn't help us get any closer to it.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It really, you would use that to exclude someone. We're going to run this against all of our possible people.
And if they don't come up,
then we know for sure they didn't do it.
Well, and it even more so, again, this guy was not trained like the examiners believed that the individual would have been. Just no other evidence. You take this Shaw out of the picture, and this guy was probably the least likely suspect.
Yeah. The other thing was that the Shaw and the value of the Shaw at the time, they believed that the Shaw would not have been able to be possessed by, I think it was, I don't remember which
Miss Eddowes.
Miss Eddowes, yeah.
They said that she, being where she was at in life and the fact that she was a prostitute, would not have been able to afford a Shaw like that. So they don't believe it to be her Shaw. That's the other argument, is that it may not be her Shaw, and that there was no DNA evidence on there that belonged to her. They were just testing the DNA against him. So, and it's all in the story. And furthermore, the police officer actually...
Maybe it was a plan.
The police officer at no point in time was ever able or at that scene. That was the other thing, is that there was no evidence that he ever went to that scene that night and reported there. He wasn't the officer that was on duty.
So this cop, he got himself a Shaw.
His family just make bank.
Yeah, he's like, hey, I'm just going to get a little blood smear on this guy. They probably at some point, talk to Mr. Aaron Kosminski, and he's nuts, and they got a little DNA from him, and they're throw it in there. I'm really curious to know what the Shaw sold for. Before the show started, we were talking about like collector cards and Beanie Babies, and like just how these objects that should have no value have ridiculous value. And I would love to know.
I'll Google it while we're talking still, but yeah. I actually have one more victim. It's kind of hard to Google, and but if somebody else wants to look it up, I can look it up.
Oh, you got another victim?
Not another victim. I mean, a suspect.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the very last victim is Mary Jane.
Oh, no, you're right.
Mary Jane Kelly.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
She didn't actually rent that room by herself. She was with a man that was suspected to be her spouse, or her. They did. It was a little iffy on whether or not they were married, but she was with someone. His name was Joseph Barnett. He would go by Davey or Danny or Davey, right? But Joseph Barnett.
I'm just curious. So your name's Joseph Barnett and you go by Danny?
I would love to know. My guess is maybe his name was Joseph Daniel
Cody,
Barnett.
We're going to start calling you Rick.
What?
I mean, it sounds like they go together.
I'm telling you, it's probably because his middle name is Daniel. Right? There's no way to know because they said back in those days there was no real log or census of kind of what was happening and all this stuff. But basically, that was the nicknames he went by. He lived with her for a significant time, and they broke up right before. He broke up in I think they said October 30th or 31st.
Oh.
Because he was a fisherman or he worked out of the fish port. He lost his job, and times got hard for them after that. And because times had gotten hard, she started hanging around with some friends, and those friends were prostitutes, and she got pulled into the scene of being a prostitute.
Those are great friends.
And he had a problem with this, argued with them, and had an issue, and eventually broke up with her on October 31st. So there's this idea that because he had such a disdain for prostitutes, and he felt the guilt for driving his wife, spouse, partner into this, that he was taking it out on these older prostitutes because she was 25, mind you. Right. And all of them were in, I think they said their 40s to 50s. They were older.
All of them in their 40s except for her. Yeah.
That the idea was that he was the one that was actually going out and killing these individual prostitutes. Right?
Yeah.
And then eventually it led up to an altercation, and he killed her. She's the only one where screams were actually heard. So when she gets killed, there's two tenants in the apartment complex that hear the screams of someone they would say are murdered or being murdered. But then it falls on deaf ears. It just gets quiet. So there's no real evidence to say he's the guy, but he had motive, which is one of the things that was the hardest things for Jack the Ripper suspects, is they needed to have motive. And a lot of the individuals we were talking about didn't have motive. There was no real reason for it. But I don't know much about his past. He was a fish porter, so he did know his way around a knife. He knew how to gut fish and do those types of things. And one of the things that we kind of experienced was it did get more sophisticated or more elaborate than what he was doing to the bodies as the murders escalated. Doesn't mean that he got better at it. It just means that he was experimenting more.
Yeah, he was just
cutting apart,
he was going
things
deeper.
out. Yeah. There was one other thing. The reason I mentioned Wooms earlier, and I wanted to go back to it, the Irishman, the guy from New York.
Yes.
There was he talked about these men meetings where he would have all these men come over and they would talk about how much he hated the women and the prostitutes. I don't know if you mentioned it. I may have not been paying attention, but there's a point and one of those guys goes in the back room
and he has them on display.
Okay, has them on display. I missed you talking about that, but yes.
No, but that's crazy, right?
That was crazy to me. And they said that there's no real evidence of that. It's just one guy's version of it. And that guy was known for being a pathological liar. And there was only one article that ever said that. But could you imagine? Could you imagine walking into a room and just a wall full of uteruses?
You're hanging out on a party. You're like, hey guys, I'm gonna use your restroom real quick. And you walk in and that's all that's on display. Just, some people got libraries. This guy just is like, hey, here's my plethora of female organs inside a jar. Sounds like a friend of Cody.
Did you look it up, Cody?
Yeah, I got it. So basically what happened is the descendants of the policeman who allegedly had the Shaw sold it to someone named Mr. Edward.
Did you find a value?
Yeah, it was an undisclosed amount. They sold it to that guy because he was obsessed with it and he wanted to pay. It said undisclosed, but in 2015, in 2007, that's when they got it from him. Edwards got it from them for the undisclosed amount, but then he put it up for auction in 2015 for $4.5 million.
Oh my Lord.
Wow.
Yeah. And so someone else took it and then they did that new test on it in 2019. So yeah,
4.5 million.
Here's the crazy part about this. All right. We don't live in a time where we see much of serial killers anymore. Right? Like it's hard. Let's be real. It's hard to become a serial killer. Ted Bundy, those types of things happen back. As technology has gotten more advanced and we've had more, understanding and senses, and we don't have a lot in the United States where we have this spot where we don't know who lives there. It's possible there could be people that don't exist. They have somewhat a footprint.
There's a way to track it down.
It's hard, right? If this were to happen today, I don't know that it would get to 5 murders, but it happened relatively fast. Right? We're talking about like a month and a half. All these murders,
August to November. So so
4
months.
Yeah, so
3.
Yeah, but there was a big gap between the 4th one and the 5th one, correct?
There was, yeah. So it was and I think so. What did I say? August 31st was the first. And then it was September 8th, and then September 30th. September 30th was the 2.
Right.
And then it jumped from September 30th all the way to November 9th.
Yeah. And I'll just add that there were a lot of other murders kind of happening throughout this that they tried to tie to Jack the Ripper, but there just wasn't enough of a tie. I think the only one that they said of the 5 that could be probably argued the most against him, it being him, would be the very first one, because it wasn't as surgical. And I believe she was stabbed 39 times, which none of the other victims had been stabbed that many times.
Right. It was more brutal.
It was more brutal. So
and none of the
there's an argument that wasn't him, and so it actually started a little later, not as early. But the reality is, it happened really fast, and a time where that you couldn't track anyone. They had, I think they have. If I saw the list, like there's over 100 possible suspects.
Right. We just talked about the main ones.
Yeah, we talked about the main ones that come up that have probably the most concrete, somewhat tie, but no real it's all substantial, right, or circumstantial. So would it be as big a story if it happened today? I mean, it would be a big story if 5 murders happened, but I think what would happen is I think that person would be caught. I think that it would be a big story for a minute and then go away. Jack the Ripper's, I mean, this is like legend.
Almost 140 years. And it's still
happening.
Like
you still have 1,000 people out there, millions of people out there looking and trying to solve this thing.
One of the most notorious serial killers of all time.
And what a name, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If it wasn't him that wrote the letters, then that dude gave him one of the, this is terrible, coolest names.
Yeah.
And infamy.
Infamy.
It's such a cool name.
Yeah. You say Jack the Ripper, people know Jack the Ripper. They may not know all this detail. They may not know, but they've heard Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And so, as we're wrapping up here, I'm going to say out of the main suspects, Francis Tumbley, I feel, and because again, though they don't know if he had extensive knowledge about anatomy or anything, but yes, like you said, that there was the individual at one of his parties that saw the organs, but having wealth, he could have easily learned, right, without going to a college or anything like that. He could have done it under the wraps, and nobody would have ever known that he had this kind of knowledge. But he was wealthy. He multiple times talked about his hatred towards women and prostitutes. And again, the possibility that he had a display of female organs in his house, reproductive organs. And the fact that after he was interviewed or, they checked him out, he bounced back to New York, where no extradition ever, extradition wasn't like a big main thing back then. So he bounced back to New York, where the murders were in the UK, and he's got free. Yeah. So that is I out of all of them, I'm going to put him at the top. He seems like, for me, the most likely suspect.
He was a self-acclaimed doctor, right? So he dealt with the herbs and all that, but there were mentions. I mean, even though he didn't have the most education, and so he wasn't. They said that they were talking about how he had like a makeshift hospital, and that he was. At one point, I read a bunch of this stuff on him. One of the things they said too is that he even claimed himself to be the pimple destroyer, right? So he knew his way around a lance and those types of things and scalpels. There was another name that he went by, but basically it was like this backyard surgeon,
Dr. Pimple Pop,
underground surgeon.
Yes.
Like he claimed to have been able to cure cancer, right? So he was no, slum. He didn't slum it around. He knew exactly what he was doing. As far as he wanted to be known for being a doctor, he was going to try.
Yeah.
So, to say that he wouldn't have stuff like that on display, I think there's a high chance, even though that they tried to rule the guy out that talked to the news and said that this is what he had shown, because they tried to talk about his past and that he was a liar and pathological. There's a lot of evidence to show that this guy could do it. Now, I still lean towards the dude that was married to Mary Jane Kelly. There's a lot of evidence there that he's pissed off. He feels guilt.
Yeah.
This is a time where they're living in Whitechapel, which has the most homeless people and drunk people on the streets, and he's the man of the house, and he's trying to take care of her, and he's feeling guilt and pressure, and they're getting ready to go back on the streets. She hadn't paid her rent in a month.
So he snapped.
I think he snapped, and he took it out on the friends. Now, there's nothing saying that these prostitutes knew each other, but he sees a prostitute and reacts.
And he gutted them like fish.
But why would he do it to her? It may be the boiling point. They broke up. He felt alone. He was by himself, living on the streets himself.
Yeah, because you said you broke up at the end of October.
October 31st, they broke up, and she was found dead, I think, at the beginning of November.
Yeah, November 9th.
Yeah. Yeah.
Poor Mary Jane.
What are your thoughts, Cody? Do you think?
I know. I like
Cody's still pondering that it's a pimp.
Yeah, a bloody pimp he is. Oh, what a rascal this guy is, huh? No, I like what's his name? Who's the? Oh, these are murders. These aren't even.
Last page. We have notes.
I have all my pages. Here we go.
So many names.
I like George Chapman. Or Savaron.
Savaron Klazaski.
Yeah.
Was this the guy that was the barber?
And he was trained medically.
So I actually looked it up. It's 1965. So it was 23 years before the first murder. Is when Sweeney Todd was released.
1865.
Sorry, 1865. Yes.
Yeah.
65 to 88. So it was 23 years. So it is very possible
for the
age line that if that were the case and this person was about their 30s and 40s, which is what they said, he would have been a young boy when Sweeney Todd came out.
Yeah. And that the original stage play was British, right?
Yep.
Or was it?
I believe it came out in London.
London? Okay.
This guy just checks all the boxes for me. I mean, like medical background, hatred of women, murdering women,
murdering of women.
Yeah, like
hatred.
Yeah, no problem disposing of like women that are even close to him.
Killed his wives.
Yeah, would leave out all hours of the night. Barber on sharp objects, obsession with people's necks.
Yeah, the former surgein. Yeah, I mean, just it goes on and on.
I like him. Also, the name change too when he moved there. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Who is this guy? There's no records.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Pretty tight. Smooth move,
but there's
dude.
So
That's
many.
Your boy Jack?
That's my boy Jack right there.
There's so many.
George's got a knife on him, does he? Don't get too close to him.
Accent is great, dude. It's so good.
It is. It totally set the atmosphere. Well, whoever, we just know that Mr. Jack the Ripper himself was a very disturbed, very bad individual, and forever will remain in infamy because it just doesn't look like they're ever going to figure out exactly who did it. So that name will stay, with the horror realm. And they've made plenty of movies, tons of movies and spin-offs of this individual. I mean, literally just one of the most infamous names in
You
all
would
of
say
history.
that some are torn up about it.
Back to this again, I see. Twist the World fam, as always, we love you. Don't
pieces.
forget to... My God.
Wow.
But
you murdered that.
You guys hear what I'm dealing with here? Literally. Hey, we love you as always. Don't forget to follow us on all of our sites. Like I said, when you get a chance, share one of those episodes. Drop a reason why. As always, we love you guys. We are out.
Peace out.
Well, we killed that one.